When you dare to share, you break the silence. When you dare to share, you speak your truth. When you dare to share, you use the full strength of your voice. When you dare to share, it brings opportunity to own your story. So tell it, be heard, and at the same time, your sharing is someone else's learning, inspiration, motivation, empowerment, and hope. There's always an element to each of our stories that remains a secret. For some, we feel it's a dirty little secret. Dare to share your untold story exposes these secrets in a welcoming and positive way. I encourage each of you out there to dare yourself to share what is yours to tell. When we dare, it is the courage to do something really important. Let this be a vow to each and every single one of us that we take risk, we brave, confront, and face what is, while inspiring and empowering all communities. So let's break that silence and tap into mental beauty. This is Salima Jadavji, your podcast host, a practicing social worker, and your mental wellness connoisseur. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast, episode number 84, The Independent Child Separated from Family and the Impact of Deep-Rooted Unworthiness. To all my fellow listeners, before we get started, I'm just dropping in a note to give you a heads up that this podcast might be emotionally triggering for you. We do invite guests onto the show who share openly about extremely difficult life moments with exposure and impact of what the struggles have been like. The intensity of each episode could have a variable impact on your emotional and mental well-being based on your own personal story. If at any point the topic becomes uncomfortable or upsetting to you in any way, please do not pressure yourself to listen. Instead, be kind to yourself, do some self-care, and perhaps give another episode a try. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing our courageous and daring guest, Jacqueline Chu. Jacqueline took a deep dive into healing and transformation after suffering from anxiety and depression during her legal career. As a criminal lawyer, she witnessed how trauma and mental health perpetuate a cycle of pain for those who hurt others and themselves. Through this experience, she found her calling to help people free themselves from the prison of their own minds. Jacqueline now practices as a psychotherapist and is the author of Facing Your Anxiety, a personal guide to freedom from anxiety. Jacqueline came from Canada on her own at age 12. The experience of racial discrimination, loneliness, and independence left a big mark that shaped the decisions she later made in her life. Having helped herself, she uses her voice to inspire people to free themselves from the prison of their own minds and transform their mental health challenges into stepping stones for healing and growth. Well, hello, Jackie. Welcome to the Dare to Share Your Untold Story podcast.
Hi, Salima. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. I'm actually delighted to have you here today to chat with you, for your willingness for us to uncover and take a deep dive and peel some layers and see what this story is all about. I've even shared with people before how I'm always humbled when, I get to chat with guests, really allowing me to tap into your vulnerabilities and draw from your strength and insight and things that get shared in the space. It's so incredible to me. So it's really important that we take a stance together to continue this new cycle to help break barriers of mental stigma.
That sounds great to me, and I'm happy to contribute.
Amazing. And of course, in case you're still wondering, this podcast is all about bringing forward untold stories that people go through, whether directly about a mental health struggle or something else. And we know that no matter the story, there is impact on one's own mental health in some way, which remains tucked away. And this platform serves in a way to break the barriers of mental stigma that have been conditioned in our society. So I continue to have this hopeful mission, and I hope that both of us today would be able to encourage people to share and tell what individuals typically have reservation to express. And of course, I continue to bring forward a trend. It's called the Mental Beauty Rethink. So, Jackie, what immediately comes to mind when you hear the phrase, the mental beauty rethink?
That's a beautiful term. And what comes to my mind is that mental beauty means wherever we are in our journey, it's beautiful as is. It's perfect in its own way, and even the most painful part of our journey.
I like it. Yeah, I hear you loud and clear with the message of embracing the imperfection, embracing the uniqueness, embracing that it's okay, wherever, whatever. Okay. You've captured the essence of my vision. This is so cool.
I've got to hear that.
Amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, game time. Ready?
Yeah, I'm a little nervous, but I'm ready.
Okay. Well, I assure you that we will only go places that you are able to go and willing to go. I'm going to try my best to not put you in any discomfort. But remember, you're the boss.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Amazing. All right, let's go for it. Okay, so for that first question, Jacqueline, give us the newspaper headline of how you would title your untold story. How would it read?
Making peace with myself.
All right, say it one more time.
Making peace with myself.
Making peace with myself. Okay, so touch on what this title means to you.
It means finally being okay with who I am. For a long time, most of my life, I was at war with myself. That's how I felt. And I hated pretty much everything about me. And I used to spend all my time trying to improve and fix what I thought was wrong with me. I used to be a self-improvement junkie. So when I made peace with myself, that's when it became okay for me to just be me.
Okay. Self-improvement junkie. Well, that's a very interesting way to put it. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that, because the elaboration you provided gives so much context to, what these few words mean to you. Well, then I'm inching to, let's move forward and take a deeper dive. So tell us what your untold story is all about. Give us that snapshot.
My untold story is about a life or death battle with myself. It's about the period of time in my life. It was about 3 years when I was preoccupied with thoughts of suicide on a daily basis. And at the time, I had deep shame about who I was. I never felt like I was good enough. And I was a lawyer at the time, and things looked pretty good on the outside. Apart from a few people who are close to me, people didn't even know that I was struggling like that. So I hid it very well. I was going to court almost every day and representing clients, and I felt like I couldn't afford to be not okay.
You mentioned that this started during the time of you going to court and engaging in legal proceedings. Was there anything that occurred before this time period?
Yeah. It specifically started when I was in law school. That's when I had an anxiety attack. I didn't even know what anxiety was at the time, although feeling it every day, but I just didn't know the term. And one day I was on my way to a meeting. I was running late. And then I had this experience of breaking down. Even then I looked fine from the outside, but internally I felt like I just had to disappear and I couldn't be myself.
Okay. And did this internal feeling of this need to disappear, is that the first time you experienced that sort of internal feeling?
It is. I think before that moment, I was coping. Yeah, it was uncomfortable every day, but not to the point that I couldn't function.
Okay, so you mentioned that, you had this anxiety attack. So there was probably a lot of stuff that was happening before you got to that point of having the anxiety attack. So what was life like for you? What were some of the things that you were contending with? Can you share that with us?
Yeah, if it's okay to go back even further, it started when I was young. I was born in Korea, and culturally, not to generalize, but emotions aren't really discussed in my culture.
Okay.
It's still a taboo, I think, to see a psychiatrist, psychologist, or psychotherapist. Yeah, but in any case, in my family specifically, even though they weren't typical Asian parents, the way we dealt with emotions was not healthy.
Mm.
Somebody either blew up or we just sweep things under the rug.
Okay, so either like suppressing or explosive. Like there's two
Exactly.
extremes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So there were a lot of explosive fights in my family. I'm an only child, so my parents, they fought a lot. And I remember feeling anxiety now that I know what it was.
Right. Well, at the time, you had no idea what those sensations were.
No idea. I remember just when they were fighting, I would try to distract myself, but not really. I would be reading a book on the sofa, but then I'm trying to hear what was going on in the room
Right.
through the cracks and thinking, are they getting divorced? Are you going to be okay? Yeah, it's just feeling really anxious and fearful.
Right. All of the unknown. And if you were so little from a young age, how little are we talking about?
I don't even remember. Maybe around I was 7 or younger, probably younger.
Right. So that's really little to have, not only to witness all of that, and you're only hearing things behind closed doors. You're probably not hearing everything. So you could also have been taking things out of context, along with feeling all the fears and scares, and your thoughts probably went in so many different directions.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would have my mind is to fill in the gaps, right? So
Right.
there was that, and then there were real explosive fights when there were words exchanged, people were swearing at each other, and
Right.
violence.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that made me very afraid.
I mean, it sounds reasonable to have been that afraid the way you're describing what you witnessed. And so, can you tell us about that was when you were 7 or younger, super little, but you did come to Canada at age 12. So, what happened between then and 12?
Yeah, so I shared that I'm an only child and my family moved around very often. Every
Okay.
year or two they would move. So I attended like 4 different elementary school, 4 or 5, I don't even remember.
Wow.
So I remember keeping a lot of my thoughts and emotions to myself because back then there was no email or WhatsApp or anything.
Right.
You move, like the only way to connect is by landline. And
Mm-hmm.
I was so young that it's kind of hard to take public transit and meet with my old friends. So
Sure.
yeah, I didn't have a lot of lasting friendships. Yeah, I just remember keeping things to myself.
Okay.
When I was 12, so the great thing about my parents is even when I was young, they respected me as an individual capable of making my own decisions. So we actually decided as a family that I would go to Canada and study there
By yourself.
by myself.
So, when you came, this was all alone.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. There was a bit of escapism on my part because I didn't like the situation at home,
Right.
how I was feeling when my parents had conflicts.
Mm-hmm.
And also in school, at the time I was being bullied for being a tomboy, and that was very painful, and that made me feel like, oh, I don't want to. I didn't really connect with my classmates in terms of interests and whatnot. So I felt like, oh, I don't want to stay here. Maybe I want to experience something different.
Right. Right. And so, school wasn't really the most comfortable place, and home wasn't the most comfortable place.
Exactly.
So it's like, oh, cool, I get to be somewhere else. Okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, run away.
Right.
That actually was my pattern for a long time.
Running away pattern.
Hmm.
Okay, so then where did you stay? Like, who did you stay with? Did you have relatives here? Did you here in Canada? Like, it's so unusual to hear that a 12-year-old child travels across the globe on their own.
I didn't really think much at the time, but it is weird now that I think about it, right? When I became an adult. But I
Mm-hmm.
stayed with family, friends. We had friends who had moved to Canada about 2 years before I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I was childhood friends with their daughters. Yeah, I decided to join them. I think one day my dad casually asked me, "Oh, do you want to go to Canada and live with them and study?" why don't you go to Canada too? I don't know if it was half joking, but that's when I said, oh yeah, sure, why not?
Well, they probably were really surprised with your response too, right?
I think so. I think so.
And so when they told you that, okay, you're going to go to Canada, and you said yes, you're on board, did you think that, oh, it's just going to be for the school year and I'm coming back? Or like, how was it positioned to you?
I don't think we were thinking that far. So I came as an international student.
Okay. So the intention was this is going to be temporary.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Temporary.
Okay.
Temporary, but for not like 6 months, a year. It's going to be, the expectation, I think, was that I would complete schooling, education there.
Okay.
So it was long term, but I think the intention was that I would come back, which never happened.
Okay. And what led to that decision for it to not be temporary?
So I think, well, I know that I really struggled when I was younger, especially when I first arrived there because I didn't speak a word of English. But yeah, as time passed, I was actually having a good time. I connected better with the culture. I enjoyed Canada. Yeah, the values. Culturally, I felt more aligned to be in Canada.
Okay. And so did you ever go back home, or did you and your family ever reconnect outside of Korea? Or what happened then if you chose to not go back?
Yeah, so what happened was that I would go back every summer.
Okay.
In winter. So there was a lot of flying, sometimes even spring break. So I would fly 2 to 3 times a year, and
Wow.
my parents visited me sometimes.
Okay. Okay. So there was regular contact that you did maintain it.
I did. But it felt very segregated, separate. So my life in Canada and my life in Korea with family, it felt like 2 different lives.
In what way?
Just that, well, distance-wise, it's really far. It's halfway across the world. And my friends had some friends, but yeah, they are childhood friends. So, and we don't really share any experiences together, the experiences that I had in Canada. And then vice versa in Canada, the friends I had, family, homestay family I had, yeah, they don't really know who I am.
I see. Okay. So are you able to share a little bit about, like, yes, you witnessed your parents' quarrels and you saw a lot of, physical things, and there was a lot of yelling and screaming and a lot of undesirable, loud stuff happening. Can you talk a little bit more about trauma that you've experienced? I mean, it must have shown up in different parts of your life or different stages of your life. What would you say those were?
The trauma when I was young.
Was it only when you were young, or did trauma follow you in other parts of your life too?
Right. I think the most significant part of trauma or trauma was after I came to Canada. So that's when I started to experience unworthiness. Because, yeah, as I shared, I didn't speak a word of English, so people treated me like I was stupid. And back then in the town that I was in, people were kind of racist. It was, I'm chuckling about it, but it wasn't funny back then. I was discriminated, and some people randomly would pick on me for no reason, and I was spat on by some kid. And
oh my God, that's awful.
It really was. And my mom visited, like, she would just be driving or walking, and people would insult her for no reason and call her a monkey and other stuff. So that's what it was like in the town that I lived in.
What else did racial discrimination look like?
I guess a lot of assumptions. This wasn't really, maybe it wasn't about really racial discrimination, but when I didn't speak English, my classmates treated me like I was stupid. Yeah, of course, I'm new to the country. I was new to the country and I was learning.
Right.
But even the teachers, they seem to make it mean that I'm somehow dumber than the other kids. And that was traumatizing to me because I did pretty well academically back in Korea. Yeah, even in sports, I was the fastest runner in my school. I captained a few sports teams there. But
Mm-hmm.
then when I came here, everything was different. People were playing different sports. I had
Right.
never played volleyball or ultimate frisbee before, and
Right.
there was a day I remember distinctly that I had never played ultimate frisbee, and we were playing a game, and I had never caught a frisbee in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, someone threw me a frisbee, and I was just standing there, and I missed it, and this boy turns to me and yells like, "I hate losers."
Oh, wow.
For a long time, that really bothered me. So now I'm a loser now.
So, would you say you started to believe the assumptions that people were making about you? Or did you feel like you were still like in fight mode?
So I think for a time I started to believe, and even maybe more unconsciously,
Mm-hmm.
I was internalizing it. And then I found a way to protect myself eventually.
Mm-hmm.
And that was to be better than everyone, to dominate whoever was taunting me, whoever was unkind to me. And so by being smart and
Mm-hmm.
strong. So yeah, that was my formula back then. That's what I relied on.
Right.
So that the way I thought back then was as long as I was better than them, I was safe.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm really curious, Jackie, coming to Canada on your own at such a young age with a family friends of yours, having the daughters as your friends. I imagine though that it was still very lonely, that it's not the same as being at home.
Yeah,
I guess I'm curious about what your support system was like.
right.
Did this family who took you in, did they get you? Did you end up having to hang out with other people's families as well? Or was that your constant family? I guess I'm just so curious about how that support network turned out for you.
Thank you for asking because that just triggered my memory of there was also significant thing that happened in my life was that basically the daughters, they were the only ones who knew me. They were the only friends I had. And
Mm-hmm.
I had relied on my friend a lot
Mm-hmm.
to guide me through school and teach me English and help me make friends because she spoke English.
Mm-hmm.
But I realize now that she was just a child too at the time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that happened was that you know how teenagers are really cliquey.
Right.
So that homestay family I stayed with, they went to a Korean church,
Mm-hmm.
and that was a huge part of their lives. I think a lot of if there's a listener who's Korean, they might relate to this. Like
Mm-hmm.
Korean immigrants in churches, it's a thing.
Mm-hmm.
The teenagers, the daughters, one of them was 2 years older than me, and one of them was the same age as me. And what they did whenever we went to church together, first of all, I wasn't a Christian, and I was kind of forced to go to church with them because church was such a significant part of their lives, sometimes twice, 3 times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually hated it. I didn't want to be there. It wasn't always like that, but whenever we went to church, it was like my two friends, they became different. How I felt at the time was they basically ditched me to fend for myself.
Right.
They went to their friends. I didn't really try to introduce or integrate me.
Right. You didn't really feel included in that.
No, no, no. They were very cliquey.
Mm. So then how did you find your people? Or did you find your people at the church?
So I didn't find my people at church. And eventually I started faking illness to not have to go to church because that experience was traumatizing too. I felt like a loser. I would go and I would just like sit by myself in a corner. I just spent time by myself and watching other people hang out and laugh and have fun. And that was not fun.
Mm-hmm. So tell me more about support. So I mean that seems like a really lonely time, and even having to fake illness just so you can get out of feeling so lonely. I imagine that the loneliness was maybe a background theme for you going on, like when you were talking about feeling alone when you were at home back in Korea, not knowing what was going to happen in your family, and coming to Canada and not being around your own people and then integrating into this family and sometimes feeling included, but sometimes not really feeling included.
Hmm.
That must have taken a toll on you.
Yeah, loneliness was definitely a theme back then.
Mm-hmm.
My homestay family, I feel grateful to them. They did their best,
Yeah.
but I think they were just preoccupied with their own problems, their own lives. It's hard being an immigrant.
Right.
How I found support eventually was when I went to high school. I started to make my own friends.
Mm-hmm.
That was nice. That was when I first experienced for the first time. And because of how I felt, being an outsider, always feeling like an outsider, I tried to include people. I tried to help people when I saw that they were lonely. I tried to form like groups where people
Mm-hmm.
felt safe and included.
Mm-hmm.
So high school was not bad, not too bad.
Okay. All right. And I'm curious because we talked also about unworthiness being such a big part of what you experienced. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so the formula that I shared before was that as long as I was better than them, I was safe.
Mm-hmm.
And that formula worked very well until I got to law school.
Well, yeah, because in law school, you're with the elite of elite, right? It's very intense.
Yeah, very intense, very smart people. And
Yeah, you're all the cream of the crop. And so that must have been a really tough piece to contend with.
yeah, for me, it was very tough because I tried very hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like I coasted. I tried hard.
You had to put in the efforts.
Yeah, I started from morning to until the library closes every day. I tried hard, but I could not dominate.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how hard I tried, I ended up being average. And that made me constantly anxious.
But you probably know now, even if you didn't know then, that even if you were average in law school, that's still pretty amazing.
I mean, that's what they said too, even when I was in law school, but
Okay.
it didn't feel like it because that's always the thing that I had relied on.
Right.
I had to dominate, otherwise I felt exposed. Like I felt like
Mm-hmm.
people can pick on me and they can harm me.
Mm-hmm. So did you start feeling like emotionally unsafe?
Yeah, all the time. All the time. I had an imposter syndrome.
Right.
I felt like I didn't belong there. So I tried to compensate by working harder and trying to get better grades and whatnot. But that didn't work.
That must have been so exhausting.
It was. It was. I think that was the build up to the anxiety attack that I told you about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So all these things happening, firing in the background of your mind. Whatever I know that I've trained myself to do, it's just not enough. I'm not enough. This is not working. Is that the kind of stuff that you were experiencing?
Yeah, exactly. And also deep shame. Deep
Okay.
shame that I didn't belong there. I really, it was some kind of fluke that I was there and I need to really prove myself
Mm-hmm.
to tell the world that I belong. So it was to the point that I went to a speech pathologist secretly. I didn't tell anyone.
Really?
Back then, I went to a speech pathologist to remove my accents because I felt like that was another thing that gave me away.
Mm. And do you feel like it helped?
Well, at the time, but now I realize I didn't have to.
Right. But you were so desperate to sort of make any change. And it seems like all the changes you were making had to do with like external factors.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So, Jackie, when people come to see me for therapy, I know you're a psychotherapist as well, but when people come to see me for therapy, one of the things that I see is that individuals are typically in one of three places. Some people are getting started. They're coming in with their whole life story. They're coming in, they want help to pick it apart and make sense of it. Some people are in the thick of things, or there's an acute stressor that's prompted other triggers and they need help to work with it and work through it. And you've got some people that are in the place of looking back, where either they're trying to get closure on something, they want to be able to create new chapters, so they want to really make some understanding or have some personal growth so they can move forward. So based on this idea of your journey and the things that you have shared about your story today so far, would you say that you are getting started, in the middle, or looking back?
Looking back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I have made peace with myself.
Right. So you're looking back. And so what do you want to remember about your process to remind yourself that I'm looking back, I've conquered this, I have made that peace? What would you want to remind yourself of?
So looking back, I realized that I had been making all these stories in my mind that looking back, I can see clearly that the formula was never necessary.
Okay. Recognizing, like, you might have been telling yourself stories that they might not have been based in fact, and the formula you were using was maybe not serving you as well as you thought.
No, it didn't serve me at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to pursue excellence, but it wasn't necessary to do that to protect myself.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been safe.
Right. And so that would be your reminder, is to remind yourself that you don't need to do those things.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, because I was always in performance.
Right. And the more you stay away from this formula, you'll be able to stay looking back.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, Jackie, earlier in our chat, you mentioned right from the beginning that, like, the crux of your story happened during law school when you had that anxiety attack that you didn't even know was anxiety, the panic sensations. And after that, there was these suicidal thoughts, and there was a really big impact on your mental well-being. So tell us more about how your mental health was affected. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that feeling of misery that you were experiencing at the time?
Yeah. So being late to a meeting triggered an anxiety attack, and the voice in my head was telling me, "Oh, like, what's wrong with you? You were never good enough. Like, you should do better than that." It was like a dam breaking in my mind. It was like the last straw, I guess, being late that day. And ever since that day, that voice telling me I'm not good enough, it took over.
It's like a critic and a bully inside of you.
Yes, for sure. And it got louder and louder.
Yeah.
It took over, and it to the point that I couldn't even go to class anymore, because when I sat in class, like, the voice would say, "Oh, you don't belong here. You don't understand. Do you even understand what the professor's talking about?"
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even take notes because I would open my laptop, start typing, and then I felt like everybody's looking at my notes and judging me, like, what the hell is she talking about? Like, it doesn't make any sense. She must be stupid.
So you were making assumptions.
Yeah. The stories again.
Stories.
Yeah. So I started avoiding putting myself out there, although I was still meeting all my responsibilities, like, that I couldn't afford to be not okay. So I still went through all the responsibilities that I had. I was the president of some clubs, and I was the athletic representative for the law school, and I still did all of that. I still took exams and I wrote papers, but inside I was falling apart.
So you were functioning on the outside and you fulfilled obligations and responsibilities, but it came at a cost.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it came at a cost. So then came the suicidal thoughts.
Yeah, talk about that. Tell us more.
I remember the exact moment when I started thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
I was reading a biography of a soccer goalkeeper who completed suicide.
Oh, whoa. Okay.
And that really resonated with me.
Really?
Yeah, he was a perfectionist like me. I was a soccer goalie. That's what that's why I was reading the book in the first place.
Right.
And I couldn't tolerate mistakes.
Mm.
It planted an idea in my head that I have a way out. Like, it's possible. People actually do this.
Mm. So for the first time, you were like, I have a way out.
A way out of my misery and suffering and all the pain.
Okay. Okay. So if you felt that this was the way out from misery and all the pain, it sounds like it just became a possibility for you.
Yeah, before I had never thought of it.
Yeah. So it never crossed your mind before. It's nothing you ever thought about. You weren't even at the place of saying, oh my gosh, life really sucks. You weren't even having any passive thoughts. This was something completely prompted from reading this bio.
That's right. I don't think I was even having passive thoughts.
Yeah, nothing. And so after reading this bio, it becomes a possibility, thinking, oh, this could be an option for me. I could end all this misery and pain. What happened?
So then it started to get stronger and stronger, the thoughts becoming more frequent. And then one day I decided to drive to Niagara Falls. And I thought if I just disappeared, if I just jumped, then nobody would notice.
Mm-hmm.
I think my body would float. But at the time, I just thought like that's how I was going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was driving to Niagara Falls, I felt a bit of a high, like, oh, this is it. I can just end all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I got there, I felt scared.
Mm.
I felt scared. I stood on the edge, and then I realized that I didn't want to.
You stood on the edge.
I did.
Okay. So you actually stood there.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
By the falls.
Okay, so you were like right there.
Yeah, yeah.
And then what happened?
Yeah, when I stood there, I realized I don't want to. I don't want to die like this.
Mm.
At the time, it made me happy. It made me okay. My mind returned to pre-suicidal period.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this wasn't the way. So yeah, I drove back, but the thoughts came back. They always came back.
Mm. So you were able to sort of let them subside. You were like, I don't want to die, not this way. Okay, I'm not going to do it. But what you're saying is those thoughts, as they went away, they also continued to come back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the time, I thought, oh, this is it. Now I can just go on living because I decided to live. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't like that. The thoughts returned soon after. And that's how it was. For 3 years, they always came back.
Mm.
So what I did was that I'd stand over the balcony. I lived on the 25th floor. I would stand there for hours at a time, mm-hmm. and sometimes after drinking a bottle of wine. And I'm a lightweight, so that's a lot of alcohol for me. So I'd lean over, just staring myself to do it. And it took me very little to set me off too. It could be a fight with a friend. It might be a mistake I made. I didn't do well on something, or somebody ignored me, and all the stupid little things.
Every time you were on the balcony on the 25th floor, no one realized what you were doing?
I don't think so. Because, we lived in a condo.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. It might have looked like you were just hanging out on your balcony?
Yeah, probably. And it was usually late at night.
Oh, okay. So it's dark outside. No one can really see you.
Yeah. Full disclosure, it might benefit some people listening. I also self-medicated with alcohol. And I never did therapy or counseling because I didn't want to be weak. I was so convinced at the time that I had to do it on my own, alone.
Right.
But I survived and made it through law school, wrote the bar exam, did articling, ran my own law practice. I just kept up the facade. But what really helped me start the healing process was opening up to people. Mm-hmm. And thankfully, I had a lot of people who cared about me. It didn't feel like that at the time because, when someone's depressed, like they feel lonely, they feel alone, they feel like nobody cares and you're just a burden. But yeah, there were a lot of people who cared about me, objectively. There was my roommate who really knew my struggles. Like she was there for me. She's the one who triggered me the most because she was my best friend. But yeah, she really helped me. She was really there for me. And I had mentors, friends, my boyfriend, who's my husband now. Mm-hmm. It wasn't all butterflies and rainbows. It's not easy to support people going through serious mental health issues like this. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. It's not, when you're going through depression, it's really not easy being around people because they can trigger you.
Sure. You were trying to self-medicate, do this all on your own. At any point, did you get help?
Yeah, eventually, because for a long time, I had told myself I had to do it alone. Being a self-improvement junkie, I read book after book, books on depression, and I had always said no to medications. But there was a turning point, and that's since opening up to people more, I started to feel safer. I started to feel like I could share more, that it's okay to rely on people from time to time. Mm-hmm. So the turning point was that I decided to check myself into a designated mental health hospital. Okay. I finally accepted that I needed help. I remember I was coming back from a Christmas family meal.
Okay.
I think it was in winter, and I was with my boyfriend, and I just felt, even though it should have been a happy family meal, I remember feeling really miserable, like this is the end and I couldn't go on anymore. Yeah, something happened inside of me. I guess we were driving back home, and I asked my boyfriend, like, I don't think it's safe for me right now. Like, can you take me to a hospital?
Mm-hmm. And you did it.
Mm-hmm. I did. The funny story is, though, it wasn't funny at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's not funny now, but they tried to reject me when I went to the hospital, because you know how they have limited resources. They have to take people who really
Mm-hmm.
are gonna kill themselves.
Did you feel it's because you were being proactive? They were not able to prioritize you?
Yeah, exactly. They started to interview me. It was my first time talking to a psychiatrist or psychologist. In their eyes, I seemed too determined and too eager to get help.
Right.
They told me, and you're a successful, accomplished person. You'll be okay. And then they tried to send me home.
Mm.
Yeah. But that didn't happen. I let them know how that was affecting me, and the words they were saying, and that I was being turned away. I was honest about it.
Mm.
Yeah. So they put me on Form 1, and I was admitted.
Wow. It's so important that you found a way to connect with your voice and not end up shutting down more because
Hmm.
people weren't getting you, thinking that you were fine, and you were like, "No, I'm here getting help so I don't go down this path, but this is what I'm truly experiencing inside me." That must have been such a brave and courageous moment for you.
Yeah. For the first time, I was doing it.
Right. That is a real win that you spoke up, you spoke your truth, and you were determined to get help and change the course.
Hmm. That was the turning point
Yeah.
for me. And more specifically at the experience I had, because once I was there, I wasn't allowed to leave
Mm-hmm.
until they thought it was safe to release me. And they took away all my cell phone, my belongings, and they removed my hoodie string and shoelaces. And it was a humbling experience. There were people who were also suffering there, like crying and yelling, and I didn't get any sleep, I
Right.
don't think. It drove home that I really needed help,
Mm-hmm.
that there are people, I was with other people who needed help, and I needed help too.
And you listened to your gut instinct of recognizing what you needed, and you found a way to get that for yourself, and you stuck it out, even when the recommendations were not necessarily what you were expecting. And even once you were admitted, obviously you don't have a say anymore, then you follow the process, right? But you worked that process. So that must have been a really important time for you.
Yeah, it was.
Mm-hmm.
Because once I was released, I started therapy twice a week, and I started medications. Thankfully, I was enrolled in a study that helped prevent side effects.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting lots of help. I started to get lots of help.
Yes, excellent. So Jackie, what's your key message to the listeners of our show? What do you want them to know?
I want them to know that if you're struggling, if you're having a tough time coping, I encourage you to seek help and just keep learning, because we only know what we know. We can
Mm-hmm.
only think from our current framework.
Mm-hmm.
That was me at the time, relying on that formula. I just need to be better than other people to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
But what if that framework is outdated and it doesn't serve you anymore, like it didn't serve me?
Yeah, like it's faulty.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when we need someone else to help us switch to a different framework,
Mm-hmm.
expand our minds so we
Mm-hmm.
we break through our limited perception and stories about ourselves and the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there is no shame in needing help. We all do.
Mm-hmm. Anything else that you think is important for them to know?
To keep going,
Keep going.
that life is a journey. And as painful as that part of my journey was that I shared today,
Mm-hmm.
I'm grateful for it, because if it wasn't for that crisis that I had,
Mm-hmm.
I would still be living at war with myself, always trying to fix my flaws, always being afraid of the next bad thing that's going to happen. But now I feel strong, and I like and respect myself.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I know what it's like to live basically imprisoned in my own mind. And because of that experience, I know what it's like to be free and happy.
Right. Yeah, happiness can be an option now.
For sure.
Well said. Okay. So I'm curious about what was that game changer inspiration for you that was close to you that reflects your untold story. So when things were in its most pivotal time, was there like an inspirational quote or mantra, affirmation, a book or a speaker, an event, something that spoke to you that really got you in that pivoting moment? What would that have been for you?
Yeah. So when I finally opened up to my mom and shared what I was going on, she sent me this picture with the quote, "Never give up." It was the picture was is about a frog about to be eaten by a bird. And the frog, it's a cartoon picture. So the frog reaches out its hand and grabs the bird's throat, and it's not letting go. And the quote says, "Never give up." So I put it on my wall. I always looked at it whenever I felt like giving up.
And then you'd remind yourself, never give up. Awesome.
And I'm glad I didn't give up.
Well, I'm glad too. Right. Okay. So then what's a cause or an organization that's been impactful to you on your journey that you'd like to give a shout out to? Who are they?
I would like to give a shout out to FCJ Refugee Center. It's an organization of love. I worked there when I was a law student. They offer all kinds of support and services to refugees and immigrants, including but not limited to healthcare, housing, settlement, and legal support. But I think what they really offer is love.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah, they taught me that we all need to support each other in times of need, and there's no shame or sense of who owes whom.
Right.
That's what they did.
Right.
The co-directors there, Francisco and Loli, they lived out that value.
Yeah.
I had never once seen them, looking so proud that like they are helping people or whatever. They just walked beside people who are in need.
Right. Right. And it's a beautiful way of operating. It sounds like a lovely organization.
It really is.
Okay, so Jackie, how can people connect with you if they would like to? How are you findable?
The best way to reach me is through my website.
Okay.
jychu.com. You can send me an email from there or use the contact form.
Okay. And you're also findable on LinkedIn, and you've done some work on Medium as well, correct?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So we've included all of that onto your show notes page, so people will be able to reach out to you those ways and check you out as well. So that's awesome.
All right. Thank you, Salima.
So, Jackie, guess what?
What?
You've just dared yourself to share. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You did it. Yeah, Jackie, I would really just like to take a moment to express my gratitude for this really important story that you've shared in this space today. Your ability to share with such vulnerability and rawness what you went through from such a young age, and how loneliness and unworthiness and all these other subtleties that you experienced, and being separated from your family and being separated from all of the surroundings of what was familiar, and trying to chart your new path and integrate and figure things out and deal with perfectionism and the imposter. There's so many elements to your story, and your story is such an important one to share and to be heard. I know that it's going to encourage others to recognize their own journey. I'm just really grateful to have been able to hear and witness your story today. So thank you for the deep conversation and for all the daring and sharing.
Thank you so much, Salima. It was a special experience, and I felt myself getting emotional, and I didn't expect that.
Surprises. That's awesome that you were able to just allow yourself to be where you needed to be. So once again, Jackie, thank you for being part of Dare to Share Your Untold Story and helping to be a voice in breaking down the barriers of mental stigma. To all of our listeners, if you like what you've been hearing on this podcast and you want to be part of breaking down barriers of mental stigma, I invite you to go wherever you are listening to the episode and hit subscribe. Leave us a comment or a review of the episode and maybe how you relate to it. To learn more about what we offer, visit www.daretoheal.co. And if you are feeling ready and brave to share, please submit your story by visiting www.daretoshare.co. Thanks for joining in.